Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and this video is going to be about optimizing your web application, or at least giving you an idea of where to start optimizing your web application, and a little incentive to go learn about progressive web applications, which is actually an incentive for me too, because it's something I need to learn more about too. But basically, let's say I go to my portfolio website, okay? So this is my portfolio website, kind of like the place where you can find out about me on the web. Not the prettiest thing. Again, I'm less of a designer, more of a back-end guy. But basically, let's say I wanted to optimize this, which is something I am going to be doing, something I want to do. I would open up the Chrome DevTools, okay, and let me get out of mobile mode. So let's bring up the Chrome DevTools. So as you know, there's several tabs that are used to help you sort of like get the page to work the way you want. So you can use the Elements tab to kind of inspect where all the different elements of your page are relative to each other, what styles apply to them, sorts of good stuff. Console allows you to interact with the JavaScript, to put variables, run JavaScript commands, look at logs that run in your client-side code, your browser code. Sources allows you to see the files that make up your website. So these are all the files your website has pulled in to make this happen. Network. Here you can see all the different requests coming in and out of your client side. So anytime your server, like my website, makes a request for anything, so I can see all these requests they made for like this file, this data. It's all here. So I can see, you know, what's succeeding, what's being cached. So I can see these 300s means it's pulling from the cache, while these 200s means it's pulled it fresh. So in that case, if something's not updating, it may be because it's cached. So I can hold Shift, refresh, so that way it does a fresh request on everything. See all 200. Okay, also I can see failed requests here if I'm working with like APIs. I can kind of understand why that request, because I click on any of these requests, get more details. So this is all good for debugging. And then there's performance. This is one where you can kind of record what's going on if you want to optimize sort of what's going on in the memory. This is also good for optimization. I haven't used this one as much, but we'll come back to that. This is another one where you can kind of take a look at what's going on memory-wise in your application. Now this shows you other things that are going on in your application. I particularly use this particular tab to look at local storage and session storage. Again, local storage and session storage are ways that you can store data on a website. Local storage allows you to store data on the user's computer perpetually. Like anytime they visit that website, that information will be available to them. Session storage allows it to be available till they close their browser. Once they close their browser or browser tab and reopen it, that local storage is cleared. And then there's a couple other cool things that are available to you, like Indexeddb, which is another way to save data on the user's computer. WebSQL, this one I'm less familiar with. And then cookies, which is sort of like the old school, still used way to save small bits of data for their application. But basically here you can, and also here's background services. I'll talk about service workers a little bit later, but if you had service workers, you can see what they're doing and how they're working over here. That's going to be kind of important to my conversation today. I'm assuming these are iframes, so this is any iframes on the page at the moment. Okay, but all that's there. And then manifest is you might sometimes see a manifest.json in certain projects. That's what that is. Again, service workers. And then here, if you want to clear everything out. Cool. Security. This just checks whether, certain minimum security checks like HTTPS are there and gives you any advice. Now here's the big one that I wanted to talk about. The Lighthouse Test. This is something that Google built into the browser, so you can test a website to see how you can improve it. So you can choose all these options here, like, do I want to optimize it for mobile? Do I want to optimize it for desktop? But either way, you can click Generate Report. And what's going to do is going to put your website through several tests. And at the end, give you a score. Okay? So when I look at this, okay, I've been using best practices. My website is accessible from the way I've written it. Not perfectly, but pretty good. But my performance, as far as how quickly it loads, and my SEO, as far as how well written this is to be read by search engines, these areas could use some improvement. Okay, and then there's this progressive web app badge. The progressive web app badge just means you've done the steps to make this a progressive web app. What this means is a progressive web app is an application that is written in such a way that it could pretty much double for a mobile application. Okay, once you trigger this, actually, you could actually distribute your web application to the Android App Store, and people can install it on their phone as if it was an app, even though you didn't learn Kotlin and make it actual native Android application. Same thing on the iPhone. I think there is a way where you can then install that application on your app. I mean, I know you can definitely open it up in Safari, hit the little like options button, and then say add the homepage, and that kind of makes it like an app icon. But the idea is that basically with the progressive web app stuff, it allows the website to work offline, allows it to cache certain assets when it is online, so that way you can use the application when you're offline, so it has the feel of a full-on web application or actual mobile application. Okay, so if you actually hit all those benchmarks, this badge will light up. Okay, so generally your goal should be to actually have all these things as close to 100 as possible and to light up this PWA badge, because there really isn't a reason why not to want your website as a progressive web application. It's sort of a newer trend, but I imagine that in the future, far as the future of mobile development, it's going to be progressive web applications, because then that saves you the cost of having to have your money in the App Store. As far as sharing your revenue, having to wait for approvals, you can just make your app and people can use it. And little by little, it has become easier to sit there and really kind of install progressive web applications on your favorite mobile phones. So that's a thing. Okay, so going back to what else you can see here, I can scroll down. Okay, I can read little like issues has said like Chrome extensions have negatively affected this page's load performance. Try auditing the page in incognito mode. So let's try that out. Let's see the difference. New incognito mode. Set over to the website, because then all those Chrome extensions aren't doing their thing. So in that case, it might not hurt the loading of the page. And let's see how much it's affecting my score. Oh wow, like 10 points. Okay. But let's see here. Did my SEO score change? Let's see here. So yeah, like 10 points worth. Okay, so keep that in mind. You might be getting dinged for Chrome extensions. Okay, and so now when you go to Performancy, it tells you sort of like, okay, these are the areas specifically where it's not liking what it sees. Largest contentful paint. That's like a paint means like actually the stuff being visual on the screen. Time to interactive. Total before, that's time before like the page loads up enough that you can actually start clicking on it. Speed index 3.4 seconds. Okay, so here it tells you sort of the things you can fix. Remove unused JavaScript. Okay, so saying if you're not using server-side rendering, split your JavaScript bundles. Otherwise, your code splitting in third parties. See, it tells you little things you can do. Estimate render blocking resources, diagnostics. Okay, and then I go to accessibility. You can give me advice of what to do. We go to SEO. Links are not crawlable. Document does not have a meta description. Okay. And then here I'll tell you what you can do to get the progressive web app badge. So it loads enough, but I do not, I need to fix the ability for it to walk offline primarily. Okay, it's installable. So there's all these little steps I have to do. Okay, now if you wanted to do that, there's a library built for kind of get it in there really easily. It's called, I think it's called Workforce progressive web app. Let's see, let me just close this for a bit. Work library for service workers. Workbox, that's it. Okay, so this library kind of allows you to build service workers much easier, because it takes a lot of the stuff you would normally do with service workers, a lot of the boilerplate, and puts them in pre-made things. Like my advice is to learn how to do it the long way first, which is what I'm planning on doing, and I'll be doing some videos on that once I get all that figured out. This will then short circuit that afterwards, going forward, because you can just use this. But the reason why you always want to learn how to do it the long way first, so that way, one, you understand how your library works, and you understand how to customize and work around it when it has limitations that limit what you want to do. So in that, like working with backend frameworks in Node, I built my own backend framework. It's not as good as like, let's say, Express or Nest, because I built it by myself over like a day. But I have a much deeper appreciation of working with like the Node HTTP library, that when I switch between like Express, Fastify, and whatnot, it just makes it more clear what it's doing because I know what the underlying Node API is. Same thing with like front-end frameworks. Like I built several different like frameworks. If you go to my libraries page, mblocks, render blocks, or set element, that allow you to build sort of component-based front ends. They're not as good as React or Vue, but building them allowed me to kind of understand better what React and Vue are doing and sort of the thought processes they went through. So when I use React and Vue, I'm able to use it more effectively. So I always recommend, just kind of like, don't use libraries and frameworks to excuse yourself from learning something. You still should learn the thing, but frameworks and libraries can help make your life easier after you've learned the thing. They can allow you to be productive with that knowledge, or more productive with that knowledge. Okay, so that's Workbox if you want to work with service workers. So that's like front end. That's front end optimization. What if I want to optimize the back end? There's a lot of different tools for that, and it also depends on what you're using, who your service provider are. So if you're using something like AWS, they probably have diagnostic tools to monitor performance. There's things like LogRocket that provide all sorts of information for your applications. I haven't used LogRocket, but it sounds cool. I see a lot of ads for it. But I mean, you can do simple things. Okay, so if I'm doing a backend application, let me see here what I got open here. That's not this file. I want to go to Scratch. There we go. Okay, one other thing I can do, so basically, if you're building a backend application, you have all your controller functions. These are the functions that determine what happens when someone makes a request to your server. Okay, so let's pretend that this is my controller function. Equals, okay, and it receives like a request and response. Well, we won't even worry about arguments right now. Okay, what you want to do is you want to measure how long it takes for this particular function to run. Because if you can make it run faster by writing the code in a different way, then you're optimizing. So one way you could do this is you could do Console.time. Okay, this starts a timer. And let's say I do console.log hello. And then I'll do console.time end, and that ends the timer. And then that should log the time. Okay, and now if I do node scratch.js. Oh, I never ran the function. My controller action. There we go. Okay, so it tells me that it took that long to console log hello. Okay. And the cool thing, see how it's called default? You can actually name your timers. So you can have different timers for your different functions. So I can say, okay, this one's called my controller action. So then when I end it, I'm ending my controller action. Okay, so you can have those at the beginning and end of your functions. So that way, at least while you're in development, you can kind of monitor how long your functions are taking. Okay. Monitor how long your functions are taking to help optimize speed. You can go back. I won't worry about speed on your first build, like just get it working first. But then with console.time, you can see how long the thing is taking, change the code in between, and try to get that number down, but do the same thing. Now, just a little debugging tip while we're here. Console.log. Let's say that all these things are commands that I made. Okay, console.log. Okay, and notice I forget to invoke this last console log. So then or let's say I do this, console.log, and then I just write the word bread. Notice I forgot the quotation marks. So it thinks it's a variable. I may not notice that right away. So I do node scratch.js and I get an order, and I'm not sure like what's going on. Maybe I have no idea what this means. Bread is not defined. What are they talking about? Where is this happening? A good diagnostic tool is console.count. Okay. So what this does, it just literally counts. So change this to count. And this way I can monitor exactly what line is triggering my error. Okay, because the idea is I can see where does it count to. So what I do is I run the program, and I see here it counted 1, 2, 3. So let's count 1, 2, 3. It never makes it to 4. So what does that tell me? The problem is on this line. Okay, so in that case, I need to figure out what's wrong with this line. Now I can figure out that it's missing the quotation marks. Okay, and I can do whee, and see now it gets the 4. Okay, so that's one way to debug. Okay, again, always make sure you clean up all these uses of the console when you're done with your application, because again, they're just for development purposes. But those are some ways to debug and some ways to optimize your application once you've already built it. So you built it, it works. You want to make it work better. On the front end, you can use Lighthouse to optimize the front end aspect of your application. Although some of the optimizations that Lighthouse will talk about, like loading and whatnot, have to do with your back end. In your back end, the simplest thing you can do is just use Console.time and measure how long your different functions run, and then optimize it function by function. And yeah, those are just some simple tips for optimizing your application. Now, as far as how to optimize individual functions, like best practices, that just goes into just deeper knowledge of your language and how it uses memory. Like just understanding sort of like when I declare a variable, where I declare a variable, how does that determine how long a variable exists in my memory? Like, is it temporarily because it's block scope? So the minute we're outside of the block, the variable gets destroyed. Or is it perpetual because we declared our variables in our global space? So always trying to like have as little persistent global variables as possible will help optimize your memory. But again, there's also, it's not just memory optimization. You're not just trying to say, okay, hey, how much memory we're using. You're also worried about processing. So if I have to redeclare variables because I don't have it persistently existing, well, then my computer has to spend more processing power more time to create those variables. So there's a constant trade-off. And you know, again, when you get to that point where you finished your app is working, it does what it wants, and now you're optimizing, you sit there and you try to balance out like, okay, hey, my app is really memory optimized, that's great, but it's running really slow because I'm redeclaring all these variables all the time. So maybe I should eat up a little bit more memory so I can save myself a little bit more processing time because I'm not declaring as many variables. The question is which variables, where am I going to get the biggest bang for my buck? Because they're variables that I use in lots of different places that I could actually just make constant, versus like redeclaring something I only use once. So these are like further down the line. So if you're like a new programmer, optimization would not necessarily be sort of the thing I would be thinking about all the time. It's just about getting things to work. But being aware of sort of the thought processes of optimization can help you think a little bit more critically about how you write your code, which is always a good thing. So my name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Have a great day and enjoy.